Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Last year, I was tasked to make a video presentation about the American regime in the Philippines. So, here is that video. Today, I will talk about the American regime in the Philippines along with the Philippine literature during the American occupation. This presentation was planned, prepared, and presented by yours truly, Chris Antonio G. Cortez. But before we dive into today's discussion, let us first know what this video will contain. It will contain a short background about the American regime in the Philippines. It will also contain notable events and the sub-periods of the American regime in the Philippines. It will contain the types of literature during the American regime. And lastly, I will cite some examples and the authors of literary pieces. So, without further delay, let's start our discussion with the American regime. Now, the history of the Philippines from 1898 to 1946 is known as the American Colonial period and began with the outbreak of the Spanish-American War in April 1898, when the Philippines was still a colony of the Spanish East Indies, and concluded when the United States formally recognized the independence of the Republic of the Philippines on July 4, 1946. With the signing of the Treaty of Paris on December 10, 1898, Spain ceded the Philippines to the United States. The interim U.S. military government of the Philippine Islands experienced a period of great political turbulence characterized by the Filipino-American War. Beginning in 1906, the military government was replaced by a civilian government, the insular government of the Philippine Islands, with William Howard Taft serving as its first Governor-General. A series of insurgent governments that lacked significant international and diplomatic recognition also existed between 1898 and 1904. Following the passage of the Philippine Independence Act in 1934, a Philippine presidential election was held in 1935. Manuel L. Quezon was elected and inaugurated as the second president of the Philippines on November 15, 1935. The insular government was dissolved and the Commonwealth of the Philippines, intended to be a transitional government in preparation for the country's full achievement of independence in 1946, was brought into existence. After World War II Japanese invasion in 1941 and subsequent occupation of the Philippines, the United States and Philippine Commonwealth military completed the recapture of the Philippines after Japan's surrender and spent nearly a year dealing with Japanese troops who were not aware of the war's end, leading up to U.S. recognition of the Philippine independence on July 4, 1946. Now, let's move on into the notable events or the sub-periods of the American regime in the Philippines. Now, the American regime was classified into three sub-periods, namely, the period of reorientation, the period of imitation, and the period of self-discovery and growth. But let's first tackle the period of reorientation. The period of reorientation covered the early years of American period and the landing of the Americans to Philippine shores, including the Filipino-American War. Even during the war, the Americans established public school system in areas that have been pacified. English language as a literary vehicle came with the American occupation in August 13, 1898. By 1900, English came to be used as a medium of instruction in the public schools. The first English teachers were the American soldiers stationed in various areas. Later on, the professional teachers arrived via U.S. Army transport ship USS Thomas. Hence, these pioneering teachers were called Thomasites. By 1908, the primary and intermediate grades were using English. It was also about this time when UP, the forerunner in the use of English in higher education, was founded. Now, the period of imitation. They were then groping their way into imitating American and British models, which resulted in a stilted, artificial, and unnatural style, lacking vitality and spontaneity. Their models included Longfellow and Hawthorne, Emerson and Thoreau, Wordsworth and Tennyson, Thackeray and Macaulay, Longfellow, Allan Poe, Irving, and other American writers of the Romantic School. During this period, the Philippines is under the rule of the Americans. Public education was introduced and became accessible to many Filipino children. more schools were established, and English was still used as a medium of instructions. Third, we have the period of self-discovery and growth. A new set of colonizers brought about new changes in Philippine literature. New literary forms such as free verse in poetry, the modern short story, and the critical essay were introduced. By this time, Filipino writers had acquired the mastery of English writing. They now confidently and competently wrote on a lot of subjects. Although the old-time favorites of love and youth persisted, they went into all forms of writing like the novel and the drama. Now, let's move on to the types of literature during the American regime. Now, there are many types of literature during the American regime. To name them, we have the allegory, epistolary, comedy, feminism, gothic, magic realism, romance, picaresque, and science fiction or sci-fi. On our list is the allegory. An allegory is a story or a poem that can be interpreted to reveal a hidden meaning, typically a moral or political one. Allegories are often used to teach lessons or to make a point about a particular issue. They can be found in all cultures and throughout history, and they have been used by writers, artists, and musicians to express their ideas and beliefs. Also, allegories can be a powerful way to communicate complex ideas in a simple and accessible way. They can also be used to explore different perspectives on a particular issue, and to encourage readers to think critically about the world around them. Second is we have comedy. Now, comedy is a form of entertainment that aims to make people laugh or find amusement. It often involves humorous situations, jokes, or sometimes witty remarks. Comedy can take various forms, such as stand-up comedy, sitcoms, movies, or even funny videos on the internet. Its purpose is to bring joy and laughter to people's lives. Common characteristics of comedy include its use of language, which ranges from vernacular speech to puns and wordplay, its use of taboo subjects, and its use of incongruence and juxtaposition. Third is we have the epistolary. Epistolary refers to a literary genre that involves writing or storytelling through letters, diary entries, or other forms of written correspondence. It's a unique way of presenting a narrative by using these written documents as the primary means of communication between characters. This style can provide a more intimate and personal perspective on the story being told. Now, the story is told through the form of love letters, diary entries, newspaper clippings, telegrams, or other documents. Moving on to the fourth one is we have the feminism. Feminism in literature refers to the exploration and promotion of women's rights, gender equality, and the representation of women's experience in literary works. It encompasses a wide range of theories, perspectives, and approaches that examine how gender roles, power dynamics, and social structures influence the lives of women and shape their representation in literature. Feminist literature includes questioning gender norms and roles, working towards gender equality, and addressing feminine issues. The fifth one in our list is Gothic. Gothic literature is a genre of literature characterized by its dark, mysterious, and supernatural elements. It often features themes of death, decay, and madness, as well as bleak and desolate settings such as castles, graveyards, and also haunted houses. Gothic literature is typically associated with horror and suspense, but it can also be including elements of romance and the supernatural. It also creates encounters with the sublime and constantly explores events beyond explanation, whether they feature supernatural phenomena or focus on the psychological torment of the protagonist. Gothic works terrify by showing readers the evil that inhabits our world. The sixth one is magic realism. Now, magic realism is a way of telling stories that is mostly used in Latin America. It involves putting magical or mythical elements into stories that seem about to be real things. Unlike traditional fantasy or science fiction, magic realism does not create entirely new or separate words. Instead, it presents magical or fantastical elements within familiar settings and everyday situations. These elements can include supernatural occurrences, mythical creatures, dreamlike sequences, or characters with extraordinary abilities. In magic realism, supernatural or magical elements are presented as a natural part of the everyday world. They are often accepted and treated as normal by the characters in the story. Seventh one in our list is realism. Realism or literary realism is an era of literary technique in which authors describe things as they are without embellishment or fantastical plots. Works of literary realism shun flowery language, exotic settings and characters, and epic stories of love and heroism. Instead, they focus on everyday lives and people in ordinary time and places. Realism is also a style of visual art that focuses on producing a photographic quality through realistic lighting, color palettes, and subject matter. Eighth one is picaresque. Now, picaresque is a genre of prose fiction. It depicts the adventures of a roguish but appealing hero, usually of low social class, who lives by his wits in a corrupt society. Picaresque novels typically adopt the form of an episodic prose narrative with a realistic style. Second to the last is the romance. The romantic genre, also known as the romance genre, is a category of literature, film, and other artistic works that typically focus on love, emotional relationships, and romantic experiences. It revolves around the development of a love story between two or more characters and often include elements of passion, desire, and emotional intensity. The romantic genre can also extend to other forms of artistic expression, such as music, poetry, and theater, where love, passion, and emotional connections are explored and celebrated. Overall, the romantic genre is characterized by its emphasis on love, emotional connections, and the explorations of human relationships, offering an escape into the world of romance and often evoking strong emotions in its audience. The last one in our list is the science fiction or sci-fi. Now, science fiction, often called sci-fi, is a genre of fiction literature whose content is imaginative but based on science. It relies heavily on scientific facts, theories, and principles as support for its settings, characters, themes, and plot lines, which is what makes it different from fantasy. Science fiction often takes place in a dystopian society sometime in the future and contains elements of advanced technology. In other words, science fiction is a form of fiction that deals principally with the impact of actual or imagined science upon society or individuals. Now, moving on to our last topic for today, we will discuss the examples and authors of literary pieces. The first one in our list is Paz Marquez Benitez. Born on March 3, 1894 and died on November 10, 1983, Paz Marquez Benitez was a Filipino short story writer, educator, and editor. Her career as a women education, as well as her contributions as a writer, are seen as an important step within the advancement of women in professional careers, as well as in the development of Philippine literature. During her career as a writer, Marquez Benitez wrote short stories critical of American imperialism. She is most known by her short story Dead Stars in 1925, in which the two main characters are displayed as allegories to American imperialism in order to portray the slow decay of Philippine heritage. Now, Paz Marquez Benitez only has two known works, that being Dead Stars and A Night in the Hills, but she somehow still managed to make a great impact on the Philippine literature. Moving on to our second one in the list, we have Faustino Aguilar. Faustino S. Aguilar is a pioneering Filipino novelist, journalist, revolutionary, union leader, and editor. Faustino was one of the first novelists in the Philippines to explore and present social realism through literature. He was also said that he is an editor of the Taliban. Now, Faustino Aguilar has 5 known literary works, that being Bosabos ng Palad, Sa Ngalan ng Diyos, Ang Lihim ng Isang Pulo, Ang Kaligtasan, and Pinaglahuan. Moving on to our third person, we have Zoilo Galang. He was a Filipino writer from Pampanga. He was also credited as one of the pioneering Filipino writers who worked with the English language. Galang was born on July 27, 1895, in the town of Bacolor, Pampanga, and to Santiago Galang and Vicenta Mercado during the later years of the Spanish colonial era, in the Philippines and was influenced by both Spanish and American culture in his youth. Some of his works include A Child of Sorrow, Tales of the Philippines, Life and Success, and The Box of Ashes. Moving on, we have Amado Vera Hernandez. Amado Vera Hernandez was a Filipino writer and labor leader who was known for his criticism of social injustices in the Philippines and was later imprisoned for his involvement in the communist movement. He was the central figure in a landmark legal case that took 13 years to settle. While still a teenager, he began writing in Tagalog for the newspaper Watawat. He will later write a column for the Tagalog publication Pagkakaisa and become the youngest editor of Mabuhay at the age of 28. Some of his works include Mga Ibong Mandaragit, Luha ng Buaya, Pili sa Pinili, Isang Dipang Langit, and Panata sa Kalayaan. The fifth one in our list is Manuel Arguilla. Manuel Arguilla was an Ilocano writer in English, a patriot, and martyr. He is known for his widely anthologized short story, How My Brother Leon Brought Home a Wife, the main story in the collection How My Brother Leon Brought Home a Wife, and other short stories which won first prize in the Commonwealth Literary Contest in 1940. Most of Arguilla's stories depict scenes in Barrio Nagrabcan, Bawang, La Union, where he was born. His bond with his birthplace, forged by his dealings with the peasant folk of Ilocos, remains strong even after he moved to Manila. Now, some of his works include How My Brother Leon Brought Home a Wife, Midsummer, A Son is Born, Morning in Nagrabcan, and Rice. The sixth one in our list is Juan Cabreras Laya. Juan Cabreras Laya is an actor. He was born in San Manuel, Pangasinan on the 12th of July, year 1911. His parents were Telesforo Laya and Alejandra Cabreros. He was the first Filipino principal of Manila North High School, or now known as Arellano High School. Some of his works include Humiliation of His Children, Out of Storm, and His Native Soil. Moving on to our last author for today, we have Wilfredo Maria Guerrero. Now, Wilfredo Maria Guerrero was a Filipino playwright, director, teacher, and theater artist. He wrote over 100 plays, 41 of which have been published. His unpublished plays have either been broadcast on the radio or staged in various parts of the Philippines. Now, some of his famous works include Half an Hour in a Convent, Wanted, a Chaperone, Forever, Condemned, Perhaps, In Unity, Deep in My Heart, Three Rats, Our Strange Ways, and The Forsaken House. That concludes our discussion for today. Thank you for listening, and I hope that you have a great day.